Welcome to the Invest for More Real Estate Podcast. My name is Mark Ferguson, and I am your host. I'm a house flipper. I flip 10 to 15 houses a year. I own 13 rental properties with a goal to buy 100 by 2023. I'm also a real estate agent. I've been licensed since '01. I run a team of 9. We sell close to 200 houses a year. So on this show, we like to interview house flippers, landlords, and the best real estate agents in the business. So stay tuned for some great shows. If you want more information on my rentals, on the numbers, how I buy properties, check out investformore.com. Hi, everyone. It's Mark Ferguson with the Invest for More podcast. I'd like to thank you for listening in and hopefully learning a lot about real estate. On these podcasts, I like to talk about a lot of different things going on, rental properties, fix and flips, being real estate agents. And today I have a great guest. Brie Schmidt is an investor and a real estate agent, which is my favorite kind of investor. I think it brings a huge advantage to the investing world, and you can also make a lot of money as a real estate agent. So I'm super excited to talk to Brie, learn how she became so successful so quickly, and see what kind of tips she has for us. So Brie, thanks a lot for joining. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great, thank you.
Great. So a little bit about you. You have 48 units now, and you started buying in 2011. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Great. And then you're also a real estate broker, not just an agent. So you're licensed in Illinois and Wisconsin, right?
Correct. Yep, I own my own offices in both states.
Very cool. So the first thing I'd like to talk about, if you don't mind, is how did you buy so many units so quickly?
Is that the first question you ask everyone?
No, but I'm impressed with 48 units in, was that less than 4 years or around 4 years? That's fantastic.
Less than 4 years. It's been crazy. And the bulk of our growth has happened in the past about 9 months. I mean, a year ago, we had 3 buildings and 8 units, and now we have 18 buildings, 48 units. And the bulk of that was really getting to scale in a secondary market. So I invest in both Chicago and Milwaukee. And the growth of the past 9 months has been solely in Milwaukee. And it was really the introduction into commercial financing where, I met with the bank. We kind of worked out what we were looking for. I really understood how they loan to me and what they look for. And they told me, as long as you have a down payment, we'll lend up to $1 million of paper on you with really not many questions asked. And so I said, okay. And that's really been what we've done. I don't think they expected me to do it as fast as I've done it, but that was really the catapult. Is they gave me an inch and I took it.
Now, is that bank? Are they a local bank or is it a national bank?
It's a national bank. I think they're in about 24 states. We work with U.S. Bank. It's their small business division, so it's not necessarily with real estate investors. But we had come to them with a strong track record, strong portfolio, essentially, and a strong ability to prove to them that we could really take anything. We have the systems in place, the people in place, and we can take the worst performing property and make it performing in a short period of time. So the thing with commercial lending, which I find very interesting, is it's not just the numbers. They have a category they look at, which is, character. So we got really, really lucky with our banker, and he got me from day one and totally got my vision, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to accomplish. He believed in me. He believed in my team, and he made a lot of things happen for us that it wasn't just, yes or no. He did a lot for us.
Usually, I have a portfolio lender who is local to Colorado. They lend in parts of California, parts of Arizona, but that's it. And they've been great to me, mostly because they loan their own money. They aren't selling notes to Fannie or the secondary market. And it sounds like that's kind of what you found too. but with a bigger bank, which is pretty rare to see in today's lending market. That's fantastic. What kind of down payments do they require from you?
20%.
Okay, yeah, that's really good.
I know, on commercial.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the story because I completely shot myself in the foot. I host our meetups here locally in Chicago, and we had a private dinner event with more experienced investors, and I was bragging about my great relationship with U.S. Bank. I'm like, I don't even tell him when I'm buying. I just send him the contracts and say, here you go, we're closing in 3 weeks. And it's a done deal. And then the very next day, I get a phone call from the bank that my guy left.
Oh, no.
So I had to start all over with a new relationship. So I just met him for the first time in January. And luckily, like the previous banker had kind of written a little bio about me, and we were able to step into the relationship with at least some sort of background on us. And it's been great. And he's picked up where the other one left off. But I was really, really, really concerned and completely shot myself in the foot for bragging about it the night before.
Well, I'm glad the new relationship is working out well. Yeah, that can be a little scary. I always wonder what I would do if my bank, changed some of their policies towards investors, or they have no limit on how many loans I can buy or get as long as I qualify for them. I've got 13 mortgages with them now on rental properties, and then another 5 on my fix and flips. And I'm like, I hope they never change their policies towards investors, because it would be tough to find another bank that will do all that. But yeah, that's great that they've been so good for you. Now, since they're commercial loans, do they have balloons, or what kind of terms do they have on those?
What we do is a little bit unique, where we generally buy 2 to 4 unit properties, which are residential asset classes, but then we do commercial loans on them. So we're not buying, 20 unit multis. So what makes it interesting is it has to meet the bank's DSCR requirements and the bank's cap rate, but then it also needs to appraise on the residential side. So that makes it a little bit more challenging, but then we're doing typical, 5-year balloons at 5% on a 25-year AM. We're just starting to explore, now that our portfolio is big enough, it's kind of opened up the doors to mid-market commercial lending. We're not just, a small investor anymore. And we're starting to see 10-year notes. We're even seeing, we even had a meeting last week with a lender that would do 30-year note on commercial. So we're starting to explore some more long-term options.
Very nice. Yeah, I know there's some other companies like the B2Rs out there who will finance, but their terms are usually, I think it's 10 years at the longest. So it's another short-term solution for real estate investors, but it's tough to find those longer-term 30-year notes for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool. When you buy these properties, are you finding them on MLS, or is it word of mouth? Are they off-market deals? How do you primarily find your properties?
It's been a mix. So, we started last January, so it's been a little over a year, is when we started exploring the Milwaukee market. So it's technically out of state for us because we live in Chicago. It's about a 1.5 to 2 hour drive one way. So it's not like it's plane right away. So we had spent the first couple of months up there every weekend, getting to know the areas, getting to know the market. And we had really struggled with finding something that worked, that we liked. And I remember the day very specifically because we went to go see this property. It's a duplex front, and then they have a coach house in the back where a garage would be. And the gentleman that was showing us the property, he said he was the property manager. Like, he knew the tenants, he knew their names, he knew what sports their kids played. Like, he had a great rapport with his tenants, and that's how we manage in Chicago. We host barbecues sometimes for our tenants, and we have great relations with them. So it was the first time that we saw that sort of interaction from the property manager between the tenant in Milwaukee. So as we were walking out, he'd mentioned, he's like, well, I'm actually the owner of this building. And I was like, interesting, like, we definitely want this, but we want more like this. Do you have any more properties? And so it turns out his mother-in-law owns about 80 properties in the area. She started investing like 50 years ago and just, bought a house a year and grew her portfolio, and now she's retiring. So the first deal we did was the one property that was on the MLS. we ended up keeping 4, but we ended up buying 7 more buildings from his mother-in-law. But then within about a week or 2 of purchasing them, we got pitched with an offer to sell them for an immediate profit. So we actually only kept 5 of those buildings with the first phase that we did. And then moving forward, we did our second purchase in December. I think all 5 of those were MLS deals. So what makes it interesting for us is that we do individual loans with the bank, but because the loan sizes are so small, they generally ask us to have at least a $200,000 loan amount when we go to them. So I coordinate 5 different sellers with one closing, and they analyze it as a portfolio, but then they lend to us individually. But since then, the last deal we bought was a lot more off market. And now that I'm up there pretty much every other week looking at properties, I've formed a lot of friendships, and everyone that I meet up there, I ask them if they know anyone that's selling. So this last deal we just bought in February, one of the properties we bought from a seller that we bought from in December. I was just up last week looking at a few properties from a seller that I bought from in December. So I keep in touch with them and constantly ask them if anything comes up, let me know, because I'm willing to buy it.
It's really amazing that you're able to buy off-market properties in a place that you're not even living in and don't have a huge, background or experience in.
Presence, yeah.
It just shows how you're not limited to your own market or MLS deals, even, hours away. That's fantastic.
But it's even funny, like last week I got a text message from a number that I don't recognize. And it was like, hey, I have this duplex that so-and-so is selling. This is the address. This is the rent. What would you pay for it? I'm like, I don't even know who this person is. So I'm offering via text message to someone I don't know. As you get into the market, a year ago when we were first looking, I didn't have connections up there. I didn't have relationships up there. But now that I do, it's like a lot easier. Like there's this one agent who tends to sell a lot of properties in the area that I invest in. And I've actually 6 of the 15 buildings that we've bought up there, she was the listing agent on. She now knows what I like and what I look for. So if she tells me to go look at something, like I'll go look at it because I know that she knows what I want. And it's a lot easier because she knows that I'll close, and it's a great relationship, and that those things only come over time.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. It's funny you said the text message. The first off-market property I bought, someone sent me a text and said, I got your letter. I was sending out direct mail, and said, how much do you want to pay for my house? That's all he said. I'm like, well, what's your address? What's the house? And he told me. It's like, okay. I'm like, I had 7 flips going at the time. I was like, I'm not really interested in buying right now, but I might be able to help you list it as an agent, or I might know of an investor. And he said, okay, how about 100,000? And that was way below market. I was like, okay, if it's what you say it is, you've got a deal. So we we conducted a transaction over text message in about 4 texts. So that was It's interesting how things work like that sometimes. On the properties you're buying, what would you say your average price per unit is? Is it pretty? I know you said it's pretty low. How low are we talking about?
It's about $30,000 per unit. Generally, we've bought, we don't really have a price range because it's all dependent on the numbers. I mean, I'll buy a $500,000 property if the numbers work out. So I think the lowest we bought a duplex for $35,000. That was our cheapest, and we've bought a duplex for $90,000. It just kind of varies. It really just depends on the numbers.
Right. What you're getting for rents and all the expenses and the condition of the property, everything's going to be different. Very cool. Now, since you're licensed in Wisconsin, are you saving money every time you buy these properties? Are you representing yourself as the buyer?
I am. I just started my brokerage up there in October. So the December deal of the 5 properties, one was with an agent that I was using. The other 4 were me representing myself. But then one of them was off market. So actually, I lied. One of them was off market. And there was no offer for compensation on the MLS. So that one I didn't get a commission on. But it was a great deal. It was a 13 cap. So I really didn't care about making a few $100. I cared about getting the deal done. So if an agent brings me stuff off market and I don't make a commission on it, it's really not the end of the world to me. It's more about the numbers working out and getting first stab at the deal before anyone else does.
Nope, that's great. Yeah, and having a license saves me a ton of money as well. But it's more important to get the deal than to save that money as an agent if there's a great deal out there. Your cap rates make me jealous.
There's definitely good caps in the area. I mean, they're not everyday numbers that you see. It's not like you could just, pick 10 properties in the MLS and find those kind of cap rates. I probably turn down 95% of deals that come across to me. But the reason being is I invest in Chicago and Milwaukee. Chicago is an appreciation market. My lowest performing property that I bought has increased over $100,000 in value. So for me to move my money away from Chicago, which is the market that I actually prefer, it needs to be really worth my time and money. So I have a very, very strict investment ROI minimum in Milwaukee.
What would you say your average rent is on your units in Milwaukee?
Our average rent is about $625.
So pretty close to the 2% rule as far as the rent versus the unit price. Very nice.
Even in Milwaukee, I'll take a lower cap on a property for two reasons. One, if it's completely newly rehabbed, windows, roofs, siding, furnaces, so that my maintenance costs long term are a lot lower. I still use the same average though. So I still use the same 7% maintenance cost, regardless if it's brand new or not. I'd rather be conservative. The second reason is if it's in an area that is up and coming, that had some appreciation potential, then I'll take a lower cap on that too.
Very cool. So we've talked about you're investing in all your units right now. You also have two brokerages, right? One in Wisconsin, one in Illinois. And then you've started a new website as well. So tell us about this new website that you've started.
So I am one of the co-founders of TurnkeyReviews.com, and it's turnkey-reviews.com. And this kind of started, it was an interesting story. So my partner, Jay Heinrichs, is a good friend of mine, and he had messaged me right around Christmas and said, wouldn't it be cool if we had a website where people could review turnkey providers? I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a really cool idea. He's like, I wonder if you could build it. I'm like, I'm sure I can find someone to build it. And we had just closed on 13 units in Milwaukee. And we were just getting past the initial, oh shit moment of trying to figure out, who left in the middle of the night, who's paying rent, like getting it under control. And so I had some downtime. So I really didn't talk about it with anyone else. We hired a developer, kind of built the site with what we thought would be beneficial, and then we officially launched it in February. So it's been interesting because we built it based off what we thought was going to work. We really didn't get market research on it, and people that we've talked with have given us some fantastic ideas and opened our eyes to a bunch of different avenues of where this site can go. So that's what we're focusing on right now, is implementing a lot of these suggestions that we've got to build the site up and really help people who are buying out of state start their due diligence process.
No, it's a great site. I've been there, and basically you let the turnkey property companies sign up for free right now, and then anybody can come on there, review their experiences, let you know how it's been, how it's gone, good or bad, and then it's all free. People can log on and just at least start to get an idea of what companies are out there and what experiences people have had.
That's really the goal of it, is you, I, and Jay Heinrichs are all pretty active on Bigger Pockets. And, every day we're seeing posts about, have you worked with this turnkey provider, or what was your experience with this? And it's a very scary avenue to explore, I think, for a lot of people, because there's not a lot of transparency. And you don't know, you're trusting someone halfway across the country to sell you something that you might not ever see and run it efficiently. And it can be very scary. So that we thought the site would be a great avenue for people looking to do this, to be able to read real life experiences, and for people that have done it to be very honest and candid about, everyone's got their pluses and minuses. Even my portfolio has its strengths and its weaknesses, and my property manager has his strengths and his weaknesses. But to be able to assess that and see, are you okay with those strengths and weaknesses? And again, it's just really a starting point of due diligence.
Yeah, no, it can be very scary. I've considered doing turnkey myself with some IRA money I have. And not only do you want to make sure you buy the right property in the right location that makes money with rent, but you want to make sure the property managers are great, that maintenance is up to date. And it's tough to do without being in the area or having friends there or somebody who can give you an idea of what you're actually buying. So, no, it's a great idea and a great site.
When we first started with Milwaukee, because every building that I've ever bought except for 2 has been technically turnkey, meaning it's been rehabbed, it's fully rented and occupied, and there's very little repairs to be done to it. But when we first started looking in Milwaukee, again, I have no problem paying a premium to have a fully operational building because it's going to save me money in the long run for vacancy and maintenance. But when we first went to Milwaukee, I had Googled, turnkey Milwaukee because that's what I wanted. I was working full time. My husband was working full time. We both traveled for work, and I just didn't have the capacity to manage a portfolio out of state, even though it's only an hour and a half, 2 hours away. So we found this quote unquote turnkey company, and they sent me a bunch of numbers. We actually went under contract to buy 9 buildings from them. It was a mix of single families and duplexes. So I think it was 9 buildings, 13 unit, but they wouldn't allow us to do inspections until we went under contract. So we went under contract, we negotiated all the prices, talked about management, all that stuff. And then we went up there, and their definition of turnkey was very, very far off from my definition of turnkey. And some of these were living conditions that I don't think would be considered habitable, but they were marketing it as turnkey. And luckily we were only a couple hours away, and we were able to go see them ourselves. But if we would have believed what they told us and not seen them ourselves, we would be in a much different situation today.
Yeah, it's stories like that scare a lot of people off.
Good. And you know what the reality is? I've talked with a ton of turnkey buyers and turnkey providers across the country, especially the last few months. And I think the problem is that there are some very good, reputable turnkey companies, but it's always the few bad apples that give the reputation that they're all bad apples. And I've gone into other states and seen their operations and seen their properties, and there's a lot of really good, honest ones. But it's the small percentage of bad ones that just kind of ruin it for everyone. And that's what we're really looking to weed out with the site is who's good and who's bad.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There are a lot of really good ones out there. And then there's a few just trying to make a quick buck, and just they ruin it for everybody. But also that brings up a point where even if you're buying out of state and don't see a property, buyers still need to do as much due diligence as they can, checking on property management companies, checking with local realtors, seeing if what the turnkey company is telling them is really accurate. And I think a lot of buyers just hope they can send them money and everything will work out great without doing any actual work themselves.
I tell buyers all the time, because, in Chicago, we do have a turnkey market here in Chicago. There are turnkey providers that provide properties here. And I get questions all the time from out-of-state buyers who are asking about a specific company. I'm like, listen, you need to find someone, whether it's me or someone else, to be present at the inspection. Don't use their inspector. Get an inspection recommendation from someone outside of their purview and pay someone, an investor in the area, a friend, a family, someone, pay them $100 to go to the inspection and be there and see what the inspector is seeing firsthand. If you can't make it out to the market, that's what you need to do. And it can cost you a few $100 extra to do the due diligence up front, but long term, it's going to save you thousands of dollars if you buy a property with lipstick on a pig that's going to have tons of problems.
Exactly. No, that's great advice. And then a lot of times too, you can even, I do a lot of REO HUD work as a real estate agent, and I do a lot of broker price opinions as well. And anybody can hire an agent to do a BPO for them, a broker price opinion. for $50, maybe $100, and they'll give you a value. Sometimes they might tell you what it would rent for, but that's sometimes out of their scope of work. But at least you know, hey, a lot of times you're buying a turnkey property at a premium because it's rented, because it's managed already. Mm-hmm. But it's good to know if you're paying 5% over market or if you're paying 25% over market. It makes a big difference.
It does. It does make a big difference. It always goes down to the numbers. And this is what I tell people too. So with Milwaukee, again, that gentleman I told you that sold us that first property, he is now our property manager. So we actually hired him to work for us, and he manages our portfolio up there because he had such a good rapport with his tenants. And the conversation that I have with him constantly and with other investors that are looking to build portfolios is the most important thing to me. Not even the numbers of the building don't really matter, but property management matters. Because the two biggest costs you're going to have is repairs and vacancies. And those are two things that your PM can control. And so if he's like letting the property, if there's a leak that he didn't fix, and 2 months later you have to rip out the entire bathroom, that's something that he can control. Just like he can control making sure that he does proper tenant screening and that the tenants are going to be moving in and not damaging your unit. So it's really important to have someone that you trust.
Sure.
I think before you find the deals.
Do you manage your properties yourself in Chicago, or do you have a different company manage those?
I do. I self-manage our properties here in Chicago. I have a property manager in Milwaukee. But we had it was an interesting situation. Like I said, when we met him, he was selling one of his investment properties because he wanted to get into real estate full time, and he wanted to do a couple of flips. And he's a teacher, so we had come to him with the idea of him being our property manager, but we weren't at the point yet where we could cover his salary. So he's currently still teaching till May 15th. And then now that we've scaled, we can now cover his salary. So that will be his last day, and he'll be working for us full time. So the past couple of months, we acquired 13 units in December and 15 units a couple of weeks ago. Has been a little crazy because we've been kind of just, here you go, have fun with it. So the deal was that I would still be involved. So he does anything that requires like a physical presence. He's there for the repairs. He's there to screen tenants, rent them out. And then I do anything like clerical on the back end. So I still run the books. And then once he is working for us full time in May, then we will slowly transition everything over to him. But I'm still, even when I'm not buying, as far as just managing the properties, I'm up there about twice a month, helping him out or like running errands or paying suppliers or showing units sometimes. It just really depends.
Okay, so that's a great introduction to what I wanted to talk about next is You have all these properties, you self-manage many of them, you've got 2 brokerages and a new website. How do you do everything that you're doing right now without going crazy? Do you have assistants besides the property manager, or is it just you? How are you managing everything?
It's just me. And then obviously my property manager in Milwaukee. It's a little crazy. And what makes it so difficult is everything I'm involved in is so reactionary. For example, so in Wisconsin, I don't take on clients. I only take on clients here in Chicago. But, in Wisconsin, things could be totally fine. And then next thing you know, we have a problem with a unit and I need to go up there. So I don't know until the day before that, something happened and I'm needed in Milwaukee. With my brokerage business here in Chicago, same thing. If there's no properties in the market for me to show, I don't really have anything to do. And then all of a sudden, 10 new properties come on the market that will be great for my clients, and my whole schedule changes and I'm showing properties. Same thing with my self-managing here in Chicago. Things are all great, and then all of a sudden there's a leak or something needs to go wrong. I need to be there to supervise the repair. And with the website, we built it to be pretty self-sustainable, but when there's bugs or a site issue, I need to drop everything I'm doing and then go fix that. So it makes scheduling very, very hard. And it always happens when I'm going to Milwaukee looking for properties. I consider that one of my leisure days. But, I drive up there. I usually leave around 6 o'clock in the morning. I start my first appointment at 8, and I do appointments every 30 minutes from about 8 to 4. And then I meet with my property manager, and we talk or whatever from about 4 to 8, and then I drive back to Chicago. So I get home around 10. And I'm never I don't have an office up there. I don't really have a home base. And it's always those days where my clients in Chicago want to write an offer. And so I'm like pulled over on the side of the road, trying to get a Wi-Fi connection and send them a DocuSign contract. So that's my biggest struggle right now is the balance. And I could think that my day is a pretty light day, and then all 4 businesses need my attention, and I'm up till midnight working on stuff. So that's my biggest challenge for sure. And once my husband still works, we are hoping to be at the point probably by June or July where he will stop working. And then that would be a huge help with me, for him helping me out with all the businesses, except for the brokerage, because he's not licensed.
Well, I can tell you, I had the same thing going on, it was probably 6 years ago. I was doing REO HUD listings, and I had over 100 listings at once because our market was just crazy with foreclosures at that time. Yeah, it was insane. And I had, I was working, my dad and I were on the same team, and we had one assistant. And then we were trying to do fix and flips and BPOs, and I didn't have any rental properties at that time, but I just about drove myself crazy working 12-hour days trying to keep up with everything. And when I hired my first assistant, it was the best thing I'd ever done because, and we talked a little bit about this before, but she had property management experience, but not real estate sales or really anything that we were doing. And it took some time to train her, but it took such a load off me because anything I didn't want to do or I didn't like doing, I'd give it to her. And it's usually minor stuff too. It doesn't have to be complicated things, but paperwork, filing invoices, the little stuff that takes up so much time. It made my life so much easier. And then after that, we hired another assistant, and I have a team manager now, and it just makes life so much easier. But it's tough taking that first step and hiring someone. Hopefully, your husband can help out with that. But my wife used to be licensed as well when we first met. She was an agent. Now she just takes care of our twin children. But
that's a job in itself.
Yeah, they're 3.5 now. So we didn't really work well together. So hopefully you guys work well together. But I don't know. I think there's only so much time you can spend with the same person at some points. So
yeah, we started running the business together. It wasn't until I left my job July 1st, 2014. That's when he stepped out of the business because I was doing it as my full-time job. So he and I ran it for about 3 years together. And so we work well together for the most part. There was definitely a few 6 o'clock in the morning fights shoveling snow because in Chicago, we get buried with snow. So he knows a lot of it, and it'll be easy for him to step back into it. But that was the responsibility that I took on was, if I'm going to quit my job, then this is my responsibility, and he can just work his day job. Because it was rough. It was a rough 3 years with both of us working full time and then having a side business. Every single weekend, nights and weekends, we were constantly working, and it's been relaxing now that even though I have all this work to do and been crazy with starting up new businesses, it's less stressful than it was when we were both working and trying to do the business together.
And then, so that brings up something else. What did you do? What was your job before?
I worked in corporate sales. So my story's a little bit weird because I actually got started in real estate when I was 17 as a assistant for a very successful residential real estate broker, but I couldn't be licensed till I was 21. So I worked for her for about 4 years every Sunday doing unlicensed activities. And as soon as I turned 21, I got my license and thought, that's what I was going to do. I was going to be a real estate agent. And I absolutely hated it. I hated it. I hated dealing with the residential side of things because my brain doesn't work that way. My brain is very, very numbers oriented. So if I would show this property to someone and be like, this is a great property because of the investment potential, and their response to me was, it doesn't feel like home, like I would just stare blankly at them because I didn't understand like where they're coming from. Plus, I was 21 years old, and it was very, very hard to establish rapport and gain their trust being so young in that industry. So I left real estate before I even turned 22. I only did it for maybe 9 months as a licensed agent, and then went into corporate sales and did that for about 9 years. But again, like my husband's a geologist. So I traveled pretty much every other week for work. And sometimes, I worked a 8 to 5 kind of day. I just flew into a city, had a meeting and flew out. But sometimes I was gone for a week. And it made it very difficult where I had to then rely on him. And we had to make sure that we both weren't traveling at the same time, because if a tenant called, someone needed to be there. And so we had spent about 3 years doing it that way. And it was very, very difficult. So if we got through that, I think we can kind of get through.
Right. Well, I know exactly what you mean with residential sales, because I started as an agent after college. I had a finance degree, but I couldn't find a finance job. I started working with my dad, and I hated showing houses to buyers because it doesn't make sense. You find the perfect house, exactly what they say they're looking for. It shows great, and they're just like, no, we don't like this house. I was like, what's wrong with it? And it's very emotional. It's very different than investing, and it's tough for, I'm very numbers oriented too. It's tough for us to get past that sometimes, and that's why when I started listing REO and HUD houses for banks, it's a numbers game to them, and that just fit me so much better. Price it, it's within this range, good. There's no emotions involved. So I know exactly what you mean there.
Yeah.
So you were in the corporate world for 9 years. When did you first think about investing in real estate or know that you wanted to be an investor?
It was kind of accidental. Again, I started as an agent at 17. I got licensed at 21. By 22, I had started working in corporate sales. But I kept my license active. So every 2 years, I did my CE and kept my license active in case I ever needed something to fall back on. Because the sales world is very, very cutthroat. I mean, my previous company would start the first Monday of the month. Our meetings were, congratulations, you have a job for 30 days. If you missed quota, you were gone. It was that cut and dry. So there was very little job security. So I maintained my license in case I ever needed it. If I ever lost my job, I had something to fall back on. And then it was in 2011, so I was 28 when we bought our first investment property. And we didn't buy it intending to be landlords. We bought a triplex here in Chicago, and we bought it because triplex or multi-unit buildings in Chicago are very, very prevalent as far as our housing stock is concerned. And we have about less than 20% of our houses here are single families. So it's about $100,000 more to own a single family house than it is to own a 2 to 4 unit house, even if they're the same size next door to each other. So we don't have kids. We were, kind of planning out our lives, and we didn't need a single family space, but we knew that eventually as we started a family and grew, we would want one. So we bought a triplex thinking we'd rent out the other units for a couple of years. And then when we started a family, we would convert it to a single family house. And that was why we bought it and how we got started with real estate investing. Turns out landlording was kind of easy. We really haven't had any horror stories especially with Chicago. We had fantastic tenants. They moved out over 2 years ago. We still talk to them, and we still see them at least once a year. We have our little old house barbecue. And it was a lot easier than we thought it was. But a few months after we had closed on the first property, my father was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer, and he passed away about 9 months later. But the thing for us was he literally passed away the day before he retired. And it was just like the day before. And that really stuck with me. Because he had, the past couple of years, he had talked about, when I retire, we're going to do this. And, when I retire, I'm going to do that. And he never got to do it. And that something in my head just switched. And I'm like, I can't work. for a corporation the rest of my life. And we might not ever have the time to go do all these things that we talk about, which is mainly travel. And that was what really kind of changed things for us. Is, you know what, we're gonna figure it out, and we're gonna work for ourselves now. And that was it.
Oh, that's awesome. Kind of the same way I started making, decent money doing REOs. I'm just like, I can't just invest in the stock market and hope I have enough money in 30 years to retire. That just doesn't make sense to me. And then I found real estate, and the same thing. There's got to be a better way to just work the prime of your life you're spent working instead of enjoying it. It doesn't make much sense. But I saw your plans for traveling this year, and they're pretty impressive, going to Europe. And it sounds like I had to ask, we just got back from Turks and Caicos, and It was the favorite place I've ever been. It was just amazing there. But what's the favorite place you've ever visited?
They're favorite for different reasons. I loved Thailand. That's where my stepmom's from, my father's wife. And we went there about 2 years ago. We're going back for a month this year, which I'm really excited about, just because the people and the culture is just so amazing. And they could, a lot of them, especially like in northern Thailand, if you work in the rice paddy fields, you get paid the equivalent to $8 a day, U.S. money. And that's a 10-hour day. But here we would be that's slave labor. But there, that's pretty generous, and they're happy with it. And they're just the happiest people. There could be gridlock traffic, and there's no honking horns because everyone's just like, I'll get there when I get there. So that was such a cool experience, being around their culture and adopting that sort of mentality. But as far as city-wise, I love Barcelona. Absolutely love Barcelona and want to go back. My husband loves Rome. That's his favorite besides Thailand. So I think we're going to try to go back this year to do that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I went to Rome after college. That was just an amazing city. There's just so much to do there. So
that's my close third.
Yeah, the history is just amazing. So, well, that's great. Well, this has been very enlightening. I have one last question to ask you, and I'll let you go here. What was the biggest mistake you ever made, and are you glad it happened?
I think, to me, the biggest mistake was missing out on a property that I really, really wanted. And I should go back a little bit. We bought our first property in 2011. We didn't buy our second property for almost a year and a half. So we had started very slowly. And then we really didn't. It took us another year and a half before we actually started getting really, really serious. So we already had kind of the foundation in place and the experience in place to scale. But there was this one property, I still think about it today, and it came up on the market about a block from another property I own. And we had the financing ready to go because my only contacts were with traditional financing. But the property was sight unseen till closing. So I couldn't do an appraisal. Therefore, I couldn't get normal bank financing. And I found myself in a situation where I wanted it so badly because I knew it was such a good deal. And I was backpedaling, trying to make contacts with hard money lenders or private money lenders that could help me out. Granted, I only needed money for about 30 days. So as soon as we closed, I could have gone in and gotten an appraisal, but I needed something in between. And I did not have those relationships established. And it was very, very hard for me to get them established very quickly. And we ended up getting money, but it was too late. They already accepted another offer by that point. So, and I still think about that house. I still check for that house every few months. I've got alerts put up on it. I swear it's been over a year, and that house still haunts me because it was such a good deal and I could have done so much with it. My lesson is, even if as a buy and hold investor, things are, they're pretty boring. Just go to a bank and get a loan and buy a property and keep it long term. So now I've made an effort to establish relationships with hard money lenders or private money lenders or transactional funders, even though in my immediate need, I don't need that kind of money. I still have to have that built up in case I ever do.
Nope, that makes sense. And I want to ask that question just because I think so many people are scared to get into investing or really to make major decisions in their life because they don't want to make a mistake. But even if you make a mistake, usually that's the best educator. It's going to teach you so much. And looking back on it, it's like, wow, if I hadn't done that or tried it, I'd be in a much worse situation now. And it just, so many things in life that people don't do because they're worried about mistakes, but oftentimes that's the best thing you can do is make mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, that was my biggest costly mistake. I would say that not getting that house cost me about $200,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a big, like, I didn't even need to see that house. And like, that was even when I was reaching out to these private money lenders or hard money lenders, I'm like, listen, I'm not going to see the house until I close. So neither are you. Like, you can't do an appraisal either. But it was my knowledge of the area, my knowledge of that building type, and my passion that was like, there's no way this deal won't work out. That got them to believe in me. A lot of them were like, what are you talking about? You have to have an appraisal. I'm like, you can't, not in this one. But other mistakes I've made, there's going to be mistakes with tenant screening, picked a bad tenant. That's one thing I'm going through right now is we had a tenant leave this month and it's now, the 25th of the month. We do not have a tenant lined up for April 1st yet. And the tenants that have applied are below my minimum requirements. So a mistake would be wanting to fill that vacancy immediately with someone that is a risky tenant. So I've had to talk myself out of that at least probably 5 times in the past week. just let it sit for another month if we need to, but don't put a bad tenant in there. It's not worth it. And there's constantly things that I have to keep reminding myself and going back to not make the same mistakes twice.
Yeah, 1 month's rent is much cheaper than a bad tenant who might have to evict, who might destroy the property. It's, much better to get a good tenant in there than to sacrifice your standards.
It's hard sometimes to remember that and to not get so excited because we've never had a single month vacancy in any of our Chicago properties. This will be our first. And it's really bothering me that we're going to have a vacancy. But again, I just can't. It's not worth it long term.
That's an amazing feat that you've never had a month vacancy. That's really impressive. I would be celebrating the fact that you've gone this far without one.
I know.
Instead of worrying about having one, because that's awesome with the amount of properties you have to have not had a vacant month. That's fantastic.
Well, that's in Chicago. That's the 8 units that I manage. We have definitely had vacancies in Milwaukee, and we're actually doing our first eviction ever in Milwaukee. So we have court on Thursday for our first eviction.
Oh, that'll be fun.
I know. I'm actually looking forward to it. I'm not required to be there. We have a lawyer that handles it, but I actually might drive up just so I can go sit in court because we've never done an eviction before. And I'm interested to see like what questions are asked and what the process is because that, the tenant hasn't paid rent since January. So we're short 2 months rent right now, but losing 2 months rent is worth it to me for this learning experience of how to handle an eviction. And what could we have done differently to have this process done faster, or what can and can't we do? Because that was one of the things that we didn't know is when we originally gave her the 5-day notice, we included late rent on the notice, and they won't accept that. You can only put the actual rent due. So we had to redo the entire process a couple of weeks later, not including the late rent, and then we could file for the evictions. Like those are things that like I'm learning, and it's only one of 40 units up there, so it's not going to kill me. But I'm excited to learn the process so that I know what to do moving forward.
Yeah, that's a great attitude. I'm lucky too. I've never had to do an eviction either, but we have had tenants get behind late and miss payments. We've always managed to work out, hey, can you at least just move out? Or we've come to an agreement where we don't have to go through the eviction process, but they ended up leaving, and we lost money on it. But I think it's usually better to end on as good a terms as you can if it's possible, because an eviction can bring out bad feelings and make the situation much worse if that's the only option.
Of course. And, when it comes to dealing with tenants, like there's always going to be late payments. There's always going to be, so-and-so hit a rough patch. They need you to work with them. And that is perfectly fine. Like we work with all of our tenants, but we don't work with people that don't tell us what's going on and then just don't pay rent, and like this specific tenant didn't tell us until she was like 28 days late that she ran into a problem and needed us to work with her. And we're like, well, at this point, you're already now going to be 2 months late. Like, we're starting the eviction process. If you would have come to us in the beginning of the month, of course we would have worked with you. We always do. So to the people that are renters, if you have a problem, just be upfront about it. Most landlords they're not unreasonable people. We have hearts, and we understand that, people hit rough patches, but you have to talk to us about it. You can't just not pay rent and then expect us to bend over backwards for you.
Right, exactly. Most landlords are actually probably too nice compared to what they should be, because it's hard to confront people. It's hard to tell them that, hey, you have to pay rent, you have to pay late fees, or we're going to kick you out. It's not an easy thing to do, but the sooner they contact us too, the sooner we know there's a problem. Of course, we're going to work with them more than if they just all of a sudden drop off the face of the earth and don't tell us what's going on.
Exactly.
So, I want to thank you a ton for doing the podcast. I've learned a lot myself. And again, it's Brie Schmidt, and your last name is SCHMIDT. And then the website you started is turnkey.reviews.com, and that's turnkey-reviews.com. And if people want to get a hold of you, is Bigger Pockets the best place to find you, or can they send you an email? How would you like people to talk to you if they want to get a hold of you?
Yeah, generally I'm on Bigger Pockets almost every single day. It's a little, I don't know, if they ever start tracking like the amount of hours that were logged into the site, I think my husband would kill me. Would be embarrassed for me. I'm on Bigger Pockets pretty much every day. You can also find me on Twitter. My handle is Chicago Brie, and that's BRIE. And then my email is also ChicagoBrie, BRIE @gmail.com.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Good luck in your investing, and I hope that you get some more help soon. Believe me, it'll be well worth it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I had a great time. All right.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.